Welcome to the Two Beans in a Pod. Listener, today we're taking a close look at something, well, huge. A really significant global trend. The worldwide decline in birth rates. You shared some really compelling material with us. There's a report from McKinsey, a commentary from Japan's National Institute for Defense Studies.
Right, NIDS.
And even some interesting angles around the movie Children of Men. So yeah, let's dive right into what this all means.
Absolutely. Our goal today really is to grasp the extent of this demographic shift. I mean, what's actually happening?
Yeah, the scale of it.
Exactly. And explore some of the key factors driving it and understand what the experience of Japan, a nation that's, really at the forefront of this, what that can tell us.
And the film angle too, right? How popular culture might offer a glimpse.
For sure. A glimpse into potential long-term consequences, maybe.
Okay. So you, listener, appreciate getting the essential info without the filler. You're looking for those key aha moments. We're going to try and cut through the noise here.
Let's do it.
So the McKinsey report, it lays out a pretty stark reality, doesn't it?
It really does. I think what immediately grabs you is just the sheer scope. The report basically argues that falling fertility rates are setting major economies on a path towards, population decline this century.
Right. Not some distant future, but now.
Exactly. And think about this number. Two-thirds. Two-thirds of humanity currently lives in countries where the fertility rate is below that replacement level.
Which is 2.1 children per family.
2.1, yeah. That's a fundamental departure from pretty much all of human history.
That's a massive, massive shift. And it's not just a little dip we're talking about, is it? The UN projections you included. They're startling.
They really are.
Yeah.
They suggest that by 2100, some major economies could see their populations shrink by, get this, anywhere from 20 to 50%.
50%. It's hard to even picture what that looks like, a seismic demographic change.
Yeah, it is. And if you look at the global age structure, what we're seeing is this fundamental inversion. Instead of the classic pyramid-shaped broad base of young people.
Yeah, lots of kids, fewer older people.
Right. We're moving towards more of an obelisk shape. A larger, older population and a shrinking younger generation.
And this transformation is hitting some places faster than others.
Yeah, advanced economies and China first. That's where it's most pronounced right now.
And the McKinsey report flags a critical implication of that, the impact on the workforce.
Precisely. They project that the working age population in these regions could fall from, 67% down to just 59% by 2050.
Wow. That's a big drop in the proportion of people actually working and, paying taxes, supporting the economy.
Exactly. And this global picture, it's reinforced by that commentary from Japan's NIDS, the National Institute for Defense Studies. They rightly emphasize that declining fertility isn't just some isolated issue for Japan.
Not just their problem.
No, it's a worldwide phenomenon.
Okay, so the NIDS commentary, it gives us a really useful framework, doesn't it? These three types of countries based on fertility rates. Can you break those down a bit?
Sure. So type 1, they label it traditional. These are countries with a total fertility rate, or TFR, above 2.0.
Above replacement.
Right. And the characteristics are kind of what you might expect. Lower levels of female education and workforce participation, lower urbanization, fewer births outside marriage, and generally higher levels of religiosity.
And the examples they give?
Nigeria, Congo, Saudi Arabia, India, places where perhaps children still play a more significant economic role and traditional social structures are maybe stronger.
Got it. Okay, so type 1. What's type 2?
Type 2 is the progressive pattern.
Yeah.
Here, the TFR is lower, between 1.4 and 1.8.
Below replacement.
Definitely below replacement. And you see the opposite characteristics. Higher female education, higher workforce participation, medium to high urbanization, more birth outside of marriage, and medium to low religiosity.
And examples here?
Think USA, Sweden, Denmark, the UK. Generally more developed economies, where women have more opportunities outside traditional family roles.
Right, makes sense. And type 3?
Type 3 is this in-between category. The TFR is often very low, sometimes below 1.3, but generally above it slightly. They have medium to high female education and work participation, like type 2.
Okay.
Medium to high urbanization, too. But interestingly, medium to low non-marital births, kind of like type 1 in that aspect, and medium to low religiosity.
And this group includes?
Italy, Greece, Spain, South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan.
Ah, okay. So Japan fits squarely in this type 3 category. What's the big insight from these categories when we look at the global decline?
Well, the commentary points out something pretty well established. As countries modernize, as they transition from type 1 towards type 2 or 3, fertility rates tend to fall.
That's the classic demographic transition idea, right?
Exactly. As societies develop, the economic need for lots of kids decreases, families invest more in fewer children, women join the workforce in greater numbers.
Yeah.
All these factors push fertility down.
But the commentary adds a twist, a distinction within those more modernized economies.
Yes, and this is really interesting. They see a divergence based on the speed of modernization.
Yeah.
Type 2 countries, like the US or Sweden,
Yeah.
they generally went through a more gradual modernization. The shift took longer. And the thinking is, maybe that allowed social norms and customs more time to adapt.
Adapt in ways that maybe help support families, even with the new economic pressures.
Potentially, yes. For instance, the higher rate of non-marital births in type 2 might suggest a greater social acceptance of different family structures, which could maybe offset some disincentives to having children within marriage.
Okay, whereas type 3 countries...
Type 3 countries, including Japan, experience what the commentary calls compressed modernity.
Compressed modernity, meaning...
Meaning a really rapid, intense period of social and economic change. Bang, everything changed very quickly.
Okay.
And the argument is that this rapid shift might not have allowed enough time for societal norms, gender roles, and support systems to evolve alongside the new economic realities.
So the culture lagged behind the economy, creating friction.
That's the idea. It potentially created bigger challenges for people trying to balance work and family. And this leads us straight into the specific situation in Japan.
Right, so Japan's really low TFR, currently around 1.3, right?
Okay.
That's partly explained by this rapid modernization outpacing cultural change.
That's a key argument from NIDs, yes.
Yeah.
They suggest these socioeconomic dynamics in type 3 countries, where economic change was swift, but traditional gender roles didn't shift as quickly.
Yeah.
That's had huge impact.
How so specifically for women?
Well, women in Japan often face this intense double burden. On one hand, there's the expectation to perform like male colleagues in a really competitive economy. That's sort of the type 2 expectation.
Compete equally.
But on the other end, there's still often a strong societal expectation that they bear almost the full responsibility for childcare and housework, more like a type 1 norm.
Wow, yeah. Pulled in two completely different directions, that must create enormous pressure.
It really does. This dual burden, as it's often called, it can force a difficult choice. You either pursue the career track, which might mean delaying or even giving up on marriage and kids, or you take the mommy track, stepping back from your career, potentially leaving the workforce entirely for a time.
Yeah.
Either way, it impacts fertility. It delays marriage, increases the number of people who remain single or childless.
And the data they show really backs this up, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's fascinating. While the fertility rate among married couples in Japan did drop a bit between, say, 1977 and 2021, from 2.19 to 1.91.
Still around replacement level for those couple.
Pretty close, yeah.
Yeah.
But the overall TFR plummeted much more drastically in that same period, from 1.9 down to 1.3.
So that big gap shows the impact of fewer people getting married or having kids at all.
Exactly. It's not just married couples having slightly fewer kids. It's more about changes in marriage patterns and childlessness. And related to that, the average age women first get married in Japan has climbed significantly.
Pushing people further out of their peak childbearing years.
Right. It effectively shrinks that window.
And the McKinsey report reminds us that Japan's demographic challenges aren't exactly brand new.
That's a good point. McKinsey notes Japan already had a relatively low fertility rate way back in 1960. It was 1.98 then.
Already below replacement even then.
Yeah. And compounding this is Japan's incredibly high average life expectancy, highest in the world, McKinsey says, at 84 years. So you have low births and people living longer.
The perfect storm for an aging population.
Precisely. They point out Japan hit that milestone. 20% of its population aged 65 or older way back in 2005.
And now it's even higher.
Now it's 30%, 1 in 3 people.
Wow. And it's quite something to see the projections for when other major countries will hit that same point Japan is at today.
It really puts it in perspective, doesn't it? China is projected to look like Japan today by 2047. Spain even earlier, 2037. France around 2079. And the US, not until after 2100.
So Japan is really living the future that many other countries are heading towards. It makes their experience incredibly relevant.
A kind of bellwether, absolutely.
And McKinsey also touches on the economic drag this creates for Japan.
Yeah, they make the point that despite having high labor intensity people work long hours, Japan's GDP per capita growth has lagged behind Western Europe and the US. It really underscores how severe the economic drag from these demographics can be.
Okay. Listener, if you're finding this breakdown insightful, maybe hit that like button to let us know. We're
Okay.
trying to piece together this complex global picture.
It really paints a sobering picture, doesn't it? The real-world consequences of falling birth rates and aging societies.
It almost sounds like, well, like science fiction, or the premise of a dystopian movie, which conveniently brings us to Children of Men.
Yeah, it's striking, isn't it? How a film from 2006 can feel so resonant with the demographic trends we're discussing right now.
So remind us of the premise.
Children of Men is set in 2027, a near future where humanity has faced 2 decades of complete infertility, no babies born anywhere, and society is predictably on the brink of total collapse.
Okay, so the cause is different mass infertility, not low birth rates by choice or circumstance, but the outcome.
The outcome, societal breakdown, despair, chaos, stemming from the absence of a next generation. It feels like an eerie, amplified echo of the potential long-term consequences that both McKinsey and NIDs are talking about.
Right, it takes that anxiety about depopulation and pushes it to an extreme conclusion. A powerful thought experiment, even if fictional.
Definitely. It vividly imagines what a world without children, without that inherent sense of future and continuity, might feel like. The loss of hope is palpable in the film.
Although it's interesting, you mentioned the Wikipedia entry notes themes of hope and faith within that bleakness.
It does. The plot revolves around protecting the first pregnant woman in decades, who becomes this potent symbol of hope against all odds.
Which kind of mirrors, in a way, the McKinsey report hinting that maybe raising fertility rates isn't impossible, that it might be a necessary societal shift or adaptation.
That's an interesting parallel, yeah. Even in the depths of the fictional crisis, there's this glimmer suggesting things could change.
Okay, so given this whole picture, the global trends, Japan's experience, even the fictional warnings, what did the reports suggest in terms of, well, solutions, or at least adaptations? Where do we go from here?
Well, McKinsey is quite blunt. They say societies are basically in uncharted waters. We haven't really been here before on this scale.
Right. No historical precedent.
Exactly. So they stress that we'll likely need fundamental changes, rethinking work practices, rethinking the whole social contract between generations.
And they emphasize the economic challenges of these inverted age structures.
Hugely. Fewer workers supporting more retirees. They suggest that unless we see dramatic increases in productivity, think AI, automation, really effective reskilling, or people start working much longer, GDP per capita growth could really slow down significantly.
So massive productivity boosts or work longer, tough choices. What about the NIDS commentary? Does it offer more specific ideas, particularly for Japan?
It does. It looks at some interesting counterexamples, like Israel and Kazakhstan, countries that also went through rapid modernization but somehow maintained replacement-level fertility.
What's different there?
NIDS notes factors like higher religiosity and younger average marriage ages might play a role. But, crucially, they also highlight examples within Japan itself.
Oh, interesting. Pockets of higher fertility.
Exactly. Like the town of Nagi. It's famous in demographic circles in Japan. They implemented really comprehensive, community-driven support systems for young families, financial aid, childcare, housing support.
And it worked.
It seems to have had a real impact, yes. Their birth rate is significantly higher than the national average. NIDS uses Nagi and a couple other examples to argue that it's not just about religiosity. Specific, targeted pronatal policies and strong community and cultural support can make a difference.
That seems really valuable, finding positive examples within the same cultural context.
It is. It shows it's not entirely deterministic. So NIDS makes several recommendations for Japan based on these insights.
Like what?
Things like actively promoting earlier marriage, maybe through media campaigns or employer initiatives, implementing progressive tax cuts and benefits for larger families, looking at systems like France has.
Right, where having more kids significantly reduces your tax burden.
Exactly. Also, incentivizing companies to adopt genuinely family-friendly work reforms. They mentioned Itochu Corporation as a company that saw success with reforms like limiting overtime and shifting work earlier.
Making it actually feasible to combine work and family.
Yeah. And another interesting one, drawing from Nagi, is engaging the elderly population more actively in helping shape a family-friendly society, getting their buy-in and support.
That's a neat idea, intergenerational support.
And finally, they advocate for a clear national strategy, maybe with a big, bold flagship policy. They float the idea of a 4-day work week, for instance, to really signal a commitment to raising fertility.
Okay, quite a few concrete suggestions there from NIDs. What about McKinsey's broader strategies for businesses and governments globally?
They focus a lot on adaptation, doubling down on productivity growth automation, AI, reskilling, as we mentioned, finding creative ways to manage and retain an older workforce, tapping into their experience.
Recognizing older people not just as dependents, but as workers and consumers too.
Exactly. Tapping the potential of senior consumers, the silver economy. Managing dependency ratios by boosting workforce participation where possible. They cite Japan's womenomics efforts as an example, trying to get more women into leadership and keep them in the workforce.
Even if it hasn't fully solved the dual burden issue we discussed?
Right, it's complex. And finally, evolving fiscally sustainable systems, pension reforms, encouraging private savings, investing more in preventive health care to keep people healthier longer, even optimizing urban design for an aging population.
So a whole suite of adaptations needed across the board.
Pretty much, it touches everything.
Okay, so, listener, this deep dive, it really reveals a hugely complex and critical global challenge, doesn't it? With profound implications for economies, societies, everything.
Yeah, this declining birth rate, it's not just some abstract statistic. It's a fundamental shift in our demographic reality, and we're only just beginning to grapple with what it means.
The case of Japan offers really crucial lessons, I think, highlighting the impact of that compressed modernity and how culture, society, and economics all weave together to shape these trends.
Absolutely, and even the fictional world of Children of Men, while it's drama, it does kind of underscore the potential gravity, the deep human anxiety underlying this whole demographic shift.
What's really fascinating here is how interconnected it all is. You know, from very personal choices people make about having families, all the way up to global economic stability, and even the stories we see in films. It raises a really important question for you, listener. What parts of this discussion really resonated with you? What further questions does this spark about navigating a future that likely involves fewer children overall? If you found this exploration useful, maybe even a bit mind-bending, please do hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the big forces shaping our world.
We really aim to cut through the complexity and give you the insights to understand what's really going on.
And finally, a provocative thought for you to chew on. In a world that's facing widespread, long-term declining birth rates, what does societal progress actually mean? How do we define it? And how do we ensure the well-being of all generations, young and old, in this new reality?